Okay, I think let's go ahead and get started for the sake of time. We have kind of a packed schedule tonight. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our 2026 National Elections Candidate Forum. My name is Annie Yu. I'm AAJ's VP of Communications and the election officer for this year's national elections. So before we get started, I just wanted to share a couple housekeeping notes and some details for today's forum. First, if the candidates could all stay muted when you are not speaking, that would be great. Also, to just give fair time to every candidate will have an opportunity to answer every question. We collected questions from members ahead of time. There were quite a few, which we were really pleased to see. So we're going to go through those and then move on to any questions that anyone who's tuning in live has, and you guys can drop them in the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom window. So please go ahead and drop those questions as they come to you. Um, Due to time constraints, we will not be able to address every question, but just know that every question will be anonymously shared with all of the candidates after the forum to ensure that they know what questions are on your mind and that your voices are heard. Everyone will be given 1 minute to respond to every question. We will rotate the speaking order after each round of questions. And then this year we have two candidates running for national president, which is thrilling. A lot of members have submitted questions specifically for these two folks, so we created a special president's round at the end of like general Q&A section. So we'll do that before closing statements. And then finally, just a reminder, ballots will be sent out June 11th, and the membership deadline for eligibility to vote is June 10th, end of day, like 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So please make sure your memberships are up to date before then, otherwise you will not be able to vote. And we have more details at aaja.org/elections. And let's get started. Introducing your candidates. We have the candidates for president in alphabetical order of last name. We have Frank B. and Jin Ding. The candidate for VP of Civic Engagement is Marian Jiaming Liu. And the candidate for VP of Finance is Carl Lam. So I'll let everyone introduce themselves with their opening statements. We'll start with the candidates for president, Frank and Jin. Then we'll go to the candidate for Vice President of Civic Engagement, Marian, and then to our VP of Finance candidate, Carl. And just a reminder to the candidates, please keep your intros to under 90 seconds. Frank, do you want to get us started?
Sure, sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Frank B. I'm running to become the next president of AAJ. Currently, I'm the senior vice president of AAJ and the head of tools and transformation at the Minnesota Star Tribune. But just quickly, before I go into my opening, I just want to first acknowledge and thank everyone that's here tonight. By being here and spending your evening here, I know you care about AAJ, and I'll just say this too, that we're really lucky to have two candidates for this position. I firmly believe contested elections are good for the organization. So I do want to thank Jin for running and for National for creating this environment as well. I think AJ is not just a membership organization. I think AJ is a promise we make to each other that we don't have to navigate this industry alone, that our stories matter, that we belong, and our careers are worth investing in. This industry is really hard. We know that. This promise, I think, is the reason I'm working at the Star Tribune today. 15 years ago, I showed up at the Detroit convention as a computer science major, unsure if journalism was right for me. But then I met Frank Shang, literally another Frank who looked like me, faced the same challenges as me, yet was going to do journalism whether his parents liked it or not. So I think you can imagine how my conversation went when I went home, right? But today, the industry isn't any easier to navigate. In fact, I'd argue it's becoming significantly more challenging. But as much as it's a challenge, I think it's a massive opportunity for us to step up, to be more proactive than reactive, to become better stewards for our careers beyond simply getting us into the industry, to expand our tent and go out of our way to show to freelancers, content creators, independent journalists, folks in academia, technology, philanthropy, JSOs, that they also belong in AAJA because I really believe that journalism is bigger than just the newsroom. So to wrap up, I've experienced AAJ from every level, from mentee to mentor, voices student to VP of programs, New York chapter president to now senior vice president. I know what AAJ can be. I also know how industry challenges will impact our members. But that promise, I think, is really worth fighting for. And I'm running to make sure AAJ keeps it for everyone who comes after us. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Jin?
Hi, good evening, AJ family, and thank you, Frank, for running with me on this election. I'm running for president because our industry is really at a defining crossroad, and AAJA must be ready not only for the challenges of today, but also the opportunities of tomorrow. Like many of you, my roots are in traditional journalism. Over the past 6 years on the national board, I've also had the privilege of serving as your VP of Finance, convention planner, and the sponsorship liaison. Together, we've strengthened AAJ's foundation and positioned our organization for the future. But leadership for me, is more than budgets and programs, right? The most important lesson I've learned in AAJA is the power of listening and the trust we built across the organization. In 2020, I started on the board in a contested election as well. Tough feedback challenged my own assumptions and pushed me to grow. Since then, I've worked to turn listening into action, launching the Mental Wellness Fund, the physical sponsorship program, and the nonprofit executive summit to meet needs our member identified. My mindset has never changed. I am here to serve, to listen, to bring people together. As president, I will lead a unified force that honor our legacy while building opportunities for freelancers, creators, nonprofit leaders, and the next generation of storytellers. I would be honored to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Marian?
Thanks all for tuning in on this late Monday evening. So I grew up in AAJA. My love for journalism and my bond with AAJA began in high school. AAJA has a way of pulling you in, and before you know it, you end up family for life. For me, it started with a scholarship, and from that moment on, I was hooked. AAJA has shaped my path, opened doors, and forged lifelong friends, many of who are here right now, you see on the screen, and probably in the audience. Just the other weekend, I spent time with a friend I met through Voices. We have known each other for more than half our lives, growing from students into journalists, career and family woman. Voices was where I wrote some of my first stories, met people who connected me to my first internship, and found mentors who helped shape the jobs and choices that followed. Since then, AJ has been with me every step. I attended conventions through college and into my professional life, from Boston to Los Angeles, Hong Kong, Florida, and DC. And when I landed my first job at the San Jose Mercury News, I knew it was my turn to give back. I served as Voices assignment editor, then as director, and spent more than a decade supporting the next generation of journalists. AJ has been my guide, my community, and my family. As a child of immigrants, I could not have figured out this industry on my own. I would not be where I am today without AJ's mentors, programs, and people. So, this whole time, I have been spearheading a style guide, but I also see Media Watch playing a bigger role in proving how journalists of color are treated in this industry and how we are covered. And I want to continue supporting AJ Plus and making sure veteran journalists feel heard, valued, and invited to keep leading. AJ should be a home where students grow, where mid-career journalists find support, and where longtime members can give back, evolve, continue in shaping our industry. AJ is in my blood. Thank you.
Thanks. Last but not least, Carl?
Hi, everyone. Carl Lamb, based in Buffalo, New York. I am a broadcast meteorologist on radio and television across the U.S., with a home base here in Western New York. But I also work as a budget analyst at the University at Buffalo. So that's my full-time job. That's where I spend most of my time and energy focused on that. But one of the things that I think people always have questions for me about is, what is your connection to journalism? I have a journalism degree. I've worked in newsrooms since 2014. I just kind of do it a little differently than everyone else. But I think the most important thing that, since I've been a part of AAJ just since 2020, so unlike Marianne, I have not had a lifelong connection. And it's sad that I didn't, but I think it's really important that you are able to find the community. And so this has really been beneficial for me. And so, kind of this pathway to running for this position is really built on the two VPs of finance that I've seen in my time when I've been attending national conventions. So, the work that Jen and Chris have done is really important to me. So, in terms of making sure that financials are strong so the organization can be strong, and providing that guidance and the insight from my professional world into what I do on a regular basis with AAJ is super important to me, and that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Now we'll head into our questions. Each candidate will get 1 minute to answer every question, and we've randomized the order candidates will answer questions in. So our first question, I would love everyone to go into what your goals are for your 2-year term, both short-term and long-term, and how are your goals going to help prepare AAJ for the next 40 years? Jen, we'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. I think we wanted to focus on at least two dual goals. One is how can we protect folks who are still in legacy newsroom roles who are these days oftenly facing more and more stress and more work and more instability in their positions. How can we be loud and proud of them, at the same time supporting them to know that there are a lot of uncertainties these days in the industry. Second is actually aggressively expand our programming to support folks who are in career transition. And I think I would not be alone in this to say that journalism will look very different in the next 5 years. And we need to position ourselves very quickly for that change. This means folks who are right now in traditional newsroom roles might thinking about leaving. Some folks might becoming more and more on becoming freelancers. More folks are taking on roles that are part-time and or journalism adjacent jobs. So we need to train those folks, help them grow, and also leaning into what AAJA is good at, which is a peer supporting network. I will stop here because I'm 10 seconds over.
Thanks, Jen. Frank, go ahead.
Yeah. So two things I think about here, right, to frame this up. I see a lot of things through kind of the floor and the ceiling, right? The floor is kind of the baseline, and how do we support folks, and especially our chapters and affinity groups, to be stronger, right? I think if you talk to a lot of them through my seat as senior vice president, they still need a lot of support, right? Our members are on that first layer of support through the chapters and affinity groups. The ceiling of that is what can we push to do more, right? The programming, the thought leadership that the affinity groups do, right? How can we be more proactive rather than reactive to the industry? Because I think Jin and I both agree the way that this industry is shifting a lot, but we have to be more proactive about how we show our members where this industry is going, right? Whether it's through broadcast, whether it's through AI, whether it's through product or technology, we have to lead the way, and we have to build that foundation so our members know where the industry is heading before it happens to them.
Thanks, Frank. Marian?
So I mentioned the style guide, which I had spearheaded its whole overhaul. We added new entries, made it a searchable living database. But this update is not the end. It is beginning. Language evolves, our communities evolve, and the way journalism describes and defines our communities must evolve with us. And reflected another term, I want to ensure this guide continues to grow with the community in place so that another decade does not pass before the next update. I also want to build on that work with Media Watch. Our industry needs a more consistent and constructive way to respond when coverage is inaccurate, insensitive, or harmful to our communities, which a lot of times feels it's increasingly so. This means creating a clear process to identify problems, flag them quickly, and work toward corrections for better framing. Not just as a reaction in moments of crisis, but as an ongoing standard of accountability. Media Watch can also play a larger role in improving how journalists of color are treated. This includes speaking up when our colleagues face unfair treatment, supporting journalists when asked to carry the burden of representation, and helping newsrooms understand that better coverage starts with respecting the people who produce it, which is us.
Thanks, Marian. Carl?
So in terms of the short-term goal and the long-term goal, I really think they're very closely aligned for the VP of Finance role and making sure that financial health is the key and, being a good steward of the money that is coming in and how do we better use that to make sure that our chapters feel supported, but also planning ahead in terms of what a convention looks like in the future and how can we do that, but also I think really importantly to sustain the organization into the next 40 years, this will be about relationship building in terms of giving to the Futures Fund. And that certainly is something that is top of mind in terms of, how to kind of sustain an organization over time. So those are definitely kind of the key things that I think about in terms of making sure that the organization is not just here for the next generation, but the generation after that in terms of financial health.
Thank you. Moving on to our second question. I know you all talked a little bit about your experiences in your introductory statements, but could you all expand on how your experiences qualify you to run for this office? Marianne, we'll start with you.
So this will be my third term Um, as a National Vice President of Civic Engagement, not only have I been on this board, I've been on several local boards, including Bay Area. I've been Director of Voices, both as a student, editor, and director, and have volunteered for several other boards, including Seattle, Hong Kong. Wherever I go, AJ goes. It always comes with me. I always go with it. So have always been, AJ has always been part of my life.
Great. We'll go to Carl next.
So for me, I work, like I mentioned, at the University at Buffalo as a budget analyst. So I'm reviewing and corresponding with respective schools and support units at the university with budgets ranging from 15 million to $225 million in terms of operating budgets each year. And so we're very closely in contact with, tracking their revenues, tracking their performance, and making sure that they are not overspending. If they are, how can we address it? Because higher ed is not the most nimble of institutions. We have to kind of think about that proactively. It's not a highly reactive field, and so we really have to be careful and prudent with our planning. I've also been a board president for a Western New York Chamber Orchestra here for 2 years. And did the budgets for them every year. So money for me has kind of always flowed through my life in terms of how to manage it and how to be a better steward and champion of those funds.
Thanks, Carl. Frank?
I first joined AAJ when I was in high school. I got pulled into a Minnesota chapter event and been involved ever since. And I've seen AAJ from every single level. So from chapter president, New York chapter president. I was a mentee. I've been a mentor. I've programmed conventions. Yeah, I counted six in the late 2010s, and this one this year too. I've served as senior vice president for the last couple of years. Done a couple initiatives as well, but I think the thing that I'm most proud of are my work with the program. So that's Voices as a student in 2011, ELP in 2019, and the work that we did in New York chapter through things like Team AJ fundraising for HQ National and the six other chapters that we worked with, but also things like when we delivered half a ton of dumplings across New York City during the pandemic, or starting the Corky Lee Fellowship during the pandemic as well. I've had a lot of different experiences. I've seen this organization from many different perspectives. So I think I'll be contributing to all of that to my service as president of AAJ.
Thanks, Frank. And Jin?
For most of my career and time in AAJA, I've been building things behind the scene rather than standing in the spotlight. That just includes, programs such as what I mentioned, the Mental Wellness Fund, and putting together a clothing swap that supports members' needs every single year at the convention. I've also fundraised quite a lot behind the scene for AAJ in the 6 years I was on the board, and I closed many sponsorships for AAJ for conventions. That also includes, building infrastructure for convention planning. That I led the team to start the first virtual convention in 2020. Then we also supported the HQ to transition into a real person event, a convention in 2022 with a brand new, fresh HQ team. But for me, it's, not only listening to members' needs, but also actually turning those needs into the actual programs that I have a lot more experience on. Thank you.
Thank you all. Moving on to our next question, how do you envision being able to work with AAJ's strategic pillars? So just as a reminder, our strategic priorities are number one, program impact and pipeline, two, member and alumni engagement, three, policy and advocacy, and four, influence and thought leadership. Carl, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think really the ability to make sure that those pillars are structurally sound in terms of kind of organizing where the fund should go. And there are frameworks for those already. And it's always healthy to have a fresh set of eyes to review. Is that the best structure? Is that the best funding model for those in terms of making sure that everything that we do is optimized, right? And so it certainly, kind of flows down the hill in terms of making sure that we do have the right programs in place to build the pipelines. Do we have enough resources to that? And, if there are programs or initiatives that just aren't kind of getting the return on investment that we need, right? We should have a conversation, a difficult conversation on whether those resources are best deployed in those spaces, right? Or do they go to member and alumni engagement or policy and advocacy, right? So it's kind of an assessment of the needs in the moment as those pillars are kind of being looked at.
Thanks, Carl. Marion?
For number one, for pipeline, I am a direct recipient of the pipeline. So for me, I would not be here if it was not for mentors that came before me that pulled me up. So always seen it important to be a bridge, not only to be a mentor, but a mentee. And I have mentors from the beginning of my career. And in the committees that I lead, I make sure that it's set up that way, that we have younger, middle, and veteran journalists so that we can pull each other up. We can learn from each other as far as policy and advocacy. Media Watch and Style Guide, it's all about that, all about how our communities are being covered. So it's really important. And as far as influence and thought leadership, with more than 20 years of experience in journalism, crossing different kind of audiences from the San Jose Mercury News, the CNN, and the Washington Post. I think about this all the time, where journalism will be going, where it's leading, where audience engagement is going, and how much journalism is changing and how much we need to evolve.
Thanks, Marion. Frank?
So last year on the governing board, we started committee structure. And I think this is a great way to envision how we work with these strategic pillars. So I run the membership committee. Someone else runs a program committee. Marion actually runs a committee of her own. And these align to the strategic pillars that we have today. Because I think part of the thesis of these committees is that as the governing board itself, we are not all the leadership that is needed. And there's a lot more leadership in this organization that can be tapped on to work on these strategic pillars, right? And part of my leadership philosophy here is really to make sure that there is space for other folks with differing opinions to be able to find themselves in a leadership position, to be able to contribute their opinion, right? And through this committee work, we've seen an increase since this is year two of those committees where more folks are interested in serving and offering their thought leadership to how AAJ satisfies its vision and strategic pillars.
Thanks, Frank. Jen?
I think for programs and the pipeline, we really are talking about how can we maintain relevance in a really changing media landscape, and how do we evolve our programs towards that. Membership, strengthening community and belonging across a membership that is increasingly diverse and geographically dispersed, that is going to be a major challenge for us. And knowing that the conventions are really expensive to attend these days, and our members might need other ways to engage with AAJA, is something that we need to focus on and support our chapters and affinity groups to do that. Policy and advocacy, and also influence and thought leadership, both pillars require focus. I think for us, we're still trying to figure out what exactly is the long-term success metrics in those pillars. And for figuring out that with members who are willing to involve in this kind of work and also take on those challenges, knowing that it won't be solved with a single program. That requires, thought leadership, strong partnerships, inside and outside of the organization, and a willingness to adapt while staying grounded in our mission in the next couple of years is a key.
Thank you all. Our next question is about DEI. Considering AAJA and its role in the journalism industry, what is your strategy towards centering diversity and inclusion in this moment? Jen, we'll start with you.
AAJA was founded because representation matters, because that civic engagement aspect. And that mission has really not changed over the 45 years of this organization. The language around DEI evolved many, many times. Political environments are still changing, but our commitment to creating opportunities, increasing representation, and supporting AAPI journalists remains essential. Our focus should stay on demonstrating impact and serving our members rather than just reacting to every political shift. And I do believe we have challenges, and we are ready to face it.
Thanks, Jen. Frank?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Jin's saying about A and HPI too, but I think it's really important to note that we're not in this alone, right? I mean, there's a lot of other affinity group organizations that are fighting for the same mission. And I think, it's been a long time since Unity, but whether you agree that Unity should come back or not, there is still a lot of work being done behind the scenes in the same mission, right? And I just want to make it really clear, we are not in this alone, and our pooled resources and our pooled voice is the most important thing that we can do. So I really applaud a lot of the local chapters today who are working with the other affinity group organizations in their locale. I'll even talk about just Minnesota chapter, right? They've recently come back with new leadership. They have recurring events with the NABJ local chapter. I mean, that works, right? And it doesn't need to take something as big as what we had before to make an impact. And I think that's really important to recognize that we can all do this on a local level with a uh, different set of expectations than we've had in the past.
Thank you. Marion?
I think this is all speaks to, DI really speaks to style guide and media watch because too often does being Asian AAPI, NHPI, it's flattened and they think we're all the same and we're not. And this includes even including members on the community that are like not just Chinese American, but Chinese American from Peru, Indian American from Guyana, and seeing all the different generations and how we can learn from each other because words matter and words mean something different to different generations and to different communities. And even having the word community be plural, I think is important in our definition. And this also was meant in the past working with different affinity groups like Black journalists, Hispanic journalists, Indigenous journalists behind the scenes and coming together on statements and joining together on what can we do together to, change the landscape of DI and be more inclusive.
Carl?
I think preserving the space that we have, whether it is digitally or in person when we're at convention, and making sure that those are still options for people and meeting them in the moment and kind of thinking quickly. And as Frank and Jen have mentioned, being proactive and not reactive, right? How can we do that with the resources that we have to make sure that people and their lived experiences are the focus, right? And making sure that we don't lose sight of that. And I don't think we do, but kind of honing in on the fact that what we do, we have all lived the fact that diversity and inclusion is far more important than I think many other people from the outside can possibly realize. And how can we continue to do the work and support it again in a VP of finance role from behind the scenes to make sure that that continues on for years to come.
Thank you all. Our next question, how will you each ensure AAJ's financial sustainability? Frank, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's a really important thing. And just applaud to Jen and Chris, who's the current VP of Finance, for all the work that they've done. It's really important. And I think it really goes to what I said in my opening. We have to expand the tent, right? I think that goes to more than just the membership, right? It's understanding that the landscape is changing. It's understanding what our sponsors want, what our community want, what our members want. And I think that's a very natural way to ensure financial stability, to find value, right? To make sure our members, our sponsors, the folks that interact with AAJ know what we're about and know that we provide value to them, to the members, and that when they hire someone from our organization, they know what they're getting. So financial stability is one of the most important things for this organization because it's the big reason that we exist today. I think a big part of it too is getting more chapters involved, getting affinity groups more involved with some of this. So just very quickly to Team AAJ, our New York City marathon fundraising initiative, we've raised over $115,000 over the last 4 years, right? And that goes to chapters directly, that goes to national, that goes to the Founders Fund as well. So more of that, but more ways for others to get involved in that fundraising too.
Thank you, Frank. Marion?
Well, there's no other way to say it, but journalism as an industry has been melting. It's been melting for a long time, and so we must evolve because a lot of our members have been laid off, have lost their jobs, have had to redefine themselves, and really it's getting to figure out their needs, even figuring out are these hotel costs reasonable? Is this membership reasonable? All those little details to make sure that we see them and then we get to their needs. So it's all about figuring all that out.
Jen?
I would say being as VP of Finance for 4 years on the board, during my term, we doubled our annual budget from 1.2 million to grow to over $2 million per year. That just shows that the fundraising capacity and the potentials we have as AAJA. Of course, right now we're facing a lot of unprecedented challenges, including corporations might not want to sponsor us just for the sake of staying away of the DEI theme. But that doesn't mean we couldn't raise fund within the AAPI community, doesn't mean that we can't build coalitions across the community to really let people see the value of AAJ brings in. And we have been successful to bring in more community sponsors in the past couple years as I was the sponsorship liaison. But in addition to that, I would also say membership is a core part of our sustainability and how can we grow our members, making sure that members see the value of being an AAJ member and also bringing more allies to this work is also equivalently important.
Thanks, Jen. Carl?
Should really be a layup in my wheelhouse. In terms of the financial sustainability, I think the biggest question that I think a fresh pair of eyes always really is important to ask what can we keep doing and what can we redirect our resources to in terms of making sure that those pipelines are there. Or the most difficult question that organizations have trouble asking themselves is what can we stop doing? And having that type of question. But also at the same time, you do have to grow your revenue base. And so that makes, everything that Marion, Frank, and Jen have been saying about growing the tent and meeting people where they are. Or is it providing programming that meets, the needs of our OGs more in terms of those types of sponsors, those types of panelists, right? How can we speak to that need more and kind of open the tent to, again, people that we might not typically think of in terms of typical sponsors, and bring those into the fold.
Thank you all. Our next question is about communication. How can communications with members be improved? And Carl, we'll just start back with you again.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that, I think I've been definitely one of those people who raised their hand and raised their hand and raised their hand and, wanted to make sure that my voice was heard. And so, you keep trying and eventually you do. But, I think in terms of financial information, how can we make that less intimidating, right? I spend my entire, life and professional on the monetary side and on the scientific side, breaking down information and trying to communicate it in a way that people understand, so people don't have to dig through our technical jargon. Look, I get it. Money can be scary. Numbers can be scary. Not everyone wants to deal with it. How can we do that and communicate with you in a way that is relevant to you, that is meaningful, and do it in a way, in a fashion where you want to consume it, right? So we have to understand what the members want to read and how they want to read it. And so that's really important to me in terms of maintaining communications, in terms of at least the financial side of things.
Thanks, Marion.
Well, first of all, I'm really easy to spot from the hair, so feel free to stop me and ask me or if you have any questions. But also trying to make it more accessible. The style guide has a form where you can always put in, because language changes. So you can always amend it, put in your own ideas for a new term that should be in there. Somebody had mentioned Bayesian to me the other day and think it's totally should be another one that should be added in. So we're discussing that. But also we're figuring that out for Media Watch. Besides, we have a Slack channel that we're building out. We're having a forum, we're having an email. So we're kind of instituting all these ways that you can reach us besides finding me from my hair at a convention. So very easy to, I'm very accessible.
Thanks, Jen.
I hear this concern frequently. I will say communications should not only happen when national and HQ we need something from our members or from our chapters and AGs. I want to build a relationship that feels more like a partnership than just a reporting. That means, for me, I think I want to do more regular listening sessions and have clearer communications around board decisions of why we make those decisions and be very honest with our members, our challenges, what we considered, and also listening to their feedback and create more opportunities for leaders across the organization to shape their priorities before shape our priorities before the decisions are already made, right? And many of our strongest ideas already exist in chapter and AGs, and national's role should be support, amplify, and connect those dots.
Thank you. And Frank?
One thing I say a lot to the teams I work with at the Star Tribune is I really believe communication is kindness. I think sometimes, especially after a long day, it's really hard to, send a note or check in on folks, right? That's why I think communication is kindness. It's worth it to someone else that you're working with or in the same organization with to over communicate, right? One of the things I'm really proud of as senior vice president is setting up leadership roundtables that we have quarterly. We've been doing that for 3 years now. People know that they can reach out to any of us on the governing board at any time, but just setting up that structure sometimes without an agenda and just having that conversation, I think is really important, right? One other thing I'll add too is this is the first year that we started doing a membership survey in some time. And this is something that I expect for us to do every single year from here on out, because how else are we hearing from our audience, from our membership? So that's what you can expect more from me for that communication as kindness, right? More leadership roundtables, more membership surveys, and just a better way to hear and build a two-way street with our membership and our leaders.
Thank you all. For the rest of our time tonight, we're going to move on to member submitted questions. One member asked, are there issues that AAJ should speak out about? And if so, what are they? Marianne, we'll start with you.
I think this is directly the role of Media Watch and Style Guide, especially in this, I guess, polarizing age, political time. A lot of times our communities are not always covered in the best light. So it's important to flag that and figure out how it should be handled. And also how our, I guess, members of our journalism community, if they're being treated well, that goes along the different affinity groups. So I think it's really important.
Thank you, Jen.
For me, I think a lot of threats these days goes to the bottom of the press freedom threats across the country and across our AAJA chapter. And those are the issues that really is going to impact the industry as a whole, which leads to a lot of problems our members are facing. That, in addition to the community that we are serving, the API community, we do see a lot of issues that are in our community that are not being reported by national media and not being spotted, not being spoken up. And those are the issues that AAJ honestly have expertise on. And we need to actually surface them more. And we need to actually be more direct about what we think are the priorities for our community and set that and say that out loud.
Thank you. Carl?
I think really leaning into kind of what Jin was mentioning is that, we are kind of the eyes and ears of our community and really have an ear to the ground and making sure that if there are issues, finding a way to share that with people either on the governing board or someone in your chapter who can relay it to the right people to make sure that that is part of the conversation, right? We don't have eyes and ears in every single location, but everyone in the audience is part of that. So if there are issues, and we're very, I think, aware as a community of everything that's happening, maybe internationally and nationally to some degree. But again, on a local level, if there are considerations that we should be thinking of, please, have that open communication that we were just talking about and share those issues.
And Frank.
This is what used to say a lot as president of the New York chapter. If AAJ doesn't do it, who will, right? As a way to understand where we belong in any issue. And that could fit to a lot of things. Like Jin said, press freedom. I'm thinking also what Marion said as well, right? Worker rights, how treatment of, folks in the newsroom, the representation of it as well, technology, AI. If AJ doesn't speak up on these issues, who will? Right. And I want to use that as a framework for understanding what issues we need to speak up on, because there's definitely more than just a few. How do we prioritize it? Where do we know we need to step in? And where do we know we need to work with other groups, other affinity groups, other groups in general to be aligned on the same issue? I think that's going to be really important. Again, where is AAJ strike zone? If AAJ doesn't do it, who will?
Thank you all. Another member question here. AAJA has grown significantly, but some members still feel disconnected from national leadership unless they're heavily involved. How would you make national leadership more accessible and transparent to everyday members? Carl, we'll start with you.
There we go. I'll be very honest. Like I was in that boat. I felt a little bit kind of adrift, where I was again raising my hand and just saying, like I would love to be more involved. And so, if that is you, and if you're sharing that sentiment, let's talk. I mean, again, finding a way to have that pipeline of communication. We have the Slack channel. Please feel free to reach out, whether we need to connect on LinkedIn. Having that avenue to talk. And, I had those people who were willing to say, yes, let's connect you with this to find a way to connect you with whoever, right? And it didn't always need to be someone on the national governing board, but if so, how can we facilitate that and communicate that outward? But again, find someone who you want to talk to, whether it's me, someone else, and how can we kind of facilitate that introduction?
Thanks, Carl. Jen?
I think, often I hear members' disagreement, and actually that doesn't worry me. Folks who give us feedback are giving us gifts. That's what I say a lot on the national board, that feedback is gift. What worries me is then when people stop talking to one another, right? So for me, I know that I often am the entry point for many members who, when they're trying to reach to the leadership. But also throughout my career, I worked with so many AAJ members who have completely different priorities, perspectives, and experiences. I think that actually made us stronger. So I encourage every single member voice your opinion, not only to our national board, but also to your chapter affinity group leaders who often have probably a more straight line to directly reaching us. And I know emailing everyone on the board might be intimidating, but I really wanted to have a simple approach. We listen first, we understand the interest behind your position, and be transparent about our decision making. That's how I would like to lead forward.
Thanks, Jen. Frank?
Yeah, I think it's a mistake that we sometimes make national leadership seem like it's like a really hard thing to get to. I've always challenged chapters that I work with and affinity groups I work with to think about where is their front door, right? Like even if you're a new member, how do you find the front door to a chapter affinity group, the national board, right? And I mentioned this earlier, but this is also a big reason we created committees on the governing board starting last year to create more layers of leadership because we know a lot of people have opinions. Some of these folks on the committees right now, they've been part of AJ for a long time. Some haven't, right? But everybody has a perspective. Everybody has a good opinion. How do we make sure that there are more front doors for them to be on so that we can hear from them? Because frankly, I think all of us here will agree they're just not enough. We just need to make them more approachable, make those front doors more visible to everyone.
And Marion?
Again, I'm here. You can find me easily. Hope to see you all at the convention. And yeah, I've pretty much grown up in AJA and I've been touched. All my jobs have been connected through some part from AJA. So it definitely has helped me. And I'm very much interested in helping whoever has questions or whoever needs help, whoever needs mentorship, job leads, anything. So I am here. I've done all kinds of programs. Have done the newcomers talk, have been a karaoke judge many, many years. So, have done all different facets of AJ in order, to bring people in order to be more accessible. So if you do have questions, feel free to find me, talk to me, and again, hope to see you at the convention.
Thanks, y'all. Next, we're going to go into a couple questions just for our presidential candidates. Both of you talked about the instability of the journalism industry and journalists leaving the field in your candidate statements. Younger journalists are increasingly questioning whether journalism is financially sustainable. What would you do as AAJ president to address this? Frank, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I love this question because, I started off as a journalist. I mean, I think this is what I say a lot too. I think all of us, most of us at least, grew up having this dream that we'd be a New York Times feature reporter. And I think a lot of us are realizing that dream, and that's awesome, right? But, you know, there are so many other opportunities out there in journalism today. And as someone who started in a newsroom, who worked at Forbes magazine, who worked at PBS NewsHour, and all these different newsrooms, there is a different side to the media organization that need people with journalistic values, folks in product, technology, business development. I would love our folks, our members, to be more aware of these organizations and for us as an organization to build that pipeline to those before folks are leaving the industry altogether. Because the thing is, there's never a shortage of folks with journalistic values in these media organizations. It's just making sure that that bridge exists. So someone could become a product manager at the Minnesota Star Tribune, or someone else could be into business development at the New York Times. We just have to make those more clear, and we have to make those bridges possible for those members.
Thanks, Frank. Jen?
I was in a very rocky boat last year without a very clear path to know whether or not I'm entering another full-time job. I spent the past year building client portfolio, taking on contracts that interested me or just to cover the bills, building my own journalism project and applying for grants. So I've been thinking about this for a long time. AJ can't solve this industry's economic challenges, right? But what we can do is help our members to navigate them. That means career support, mentorship, networking opportunities, and mental health resources, just like the ones that we put out, I led in the past, and skill trainings that are really training transferable skills and stronger connections, building that across our community. And I think one of the AJ's greatest strengths is the people actually generally want to help each other. And I want to build the systems that can facilitate that support and make it easier to access.
Thank you both. Our next member submitted a question. How do you make decisions when board members strongly disagree with you? Frank, we'll start with you.
Yeah, strongly disagree. I mean, look, I have an expectation that on the board there will be disagreement. Disagreement is good, right? I think having different perspective is always important, but we also have to manage the trade-offs, right? We have to have the conversation, and I think it's the right word here is we can't always come to an agreement on everything, right? But we always have to make sure that everyone on the board is understood, their opinions are out there, and there's a safe space for those opinions and different thoughts, agreements to live out in the open, right? I don't want to have an organization or a board or even a leadership board in the New York chapter, for example, where everybody's agreeing to the same thing. We have to make sure different opinions, different perspectives are there, and we all have to be accountable to the trade-offs of each of them.
Thank you. Jen?
I would say not every decision we make would make everyone happy. And but at the same time, everyone deserves honesty and respect in us, right? I've learned in my career through managing many conflicts that conflicts could become much manageable when people feel heard and respected. I would lead in that spirit. But at the same time, I would also say I oftenly on the board am a swing voter. People would persuade me one way or another, even though in the beginning maybe I have my mindset set on one way. And that is actually good. I learn a lot from serving on the board with different opinions, and it's been really joyful to work with leaders. And often I don't win my battle. That is totally okay.
Thank you both. Our next member submitted a question. Tell us about a time you changed your mind because of someone else's input. Jen, we'll start with you.
Oh gosh, I change my mind pretty often on the board. I will say, going into a little bit conflict situation when one of our AGs wanted us to issue a statement around a member's work being attacked by a ward committee and also by another media project out there. Initially, my answer was no. And in fact, I didn't win that battle on the board either. Initially, my answer is no. I was like, this is too messy. It's not our lane. Why should we decide on this? We don't have the expertise to examine the work ourselves. But then I listened to why the affinity group leaders want us to issue that statement or why they are also themselves facing a lot of conflict within. And I learned that they have a specific angle about why this award is treating this AAPI journalist very unfairly. And I actually advocated to figuring out a way to say that out loud. But I didn't win that battle on the board. It's fine. Moving on.
Thank you, Frank.
And this is a great question. I think of two times, especially that ring to me here. One of them was recently a couple months ago on our membership committee when we were talking about how we were envisioning affinity groups get created, right? Because I think part of my philosophy there was to make sure that we had a very solid structure for it. But I had heard folks from my committee or heard folks say on my committee that, we have to be more empathetic to the folks who may not have as much time to gather the signatures, et cetera. And we had a very good conversation. I was able to change my mind on that. Another time, too, I'll say in 2018, when I was elected as vice president of journalism programs, working with the programs and understanding and being a member of those programs or having been a graduate of those programs, I definitely had a lot of preconceived notions of what the programs should be, right? And a lot of us, as we run for these positions, we have that. But I heard those program directors, and I was better to understand what they were coming from and why, right? And that was another instance of where I changed my mind, how I felt like the program should have been run from my campaign to the actual execution in the operationalization of one of those programs.
Thank you both. Our next question, submitted by a member. If elected president, how will you support the Asia chapter? Frank, we'll start with you.
Yeah, 100%. So the AAJA chapter is a really important chapter in our organization and its sub chapters as well. I think the most important thing from my vantage point as senior vice president right now is that we cannot continue treating the Asia chapter and its sub chapters as the same thing as the 21 chapters in the United States. They need to be supported in an entirely different structure, I believe, right? And they need to be given the different perspective, and we need to also better understand their perspective here in the United States as well. Also think there's just not a great bridge between the continental US chapters and the Asia chapter today. There's a lot of cultural differences, economic differences. I think they all need to be realized, programming differences as well. I just see this as a lot of opportunity that we can bridge if we were working a little closer together, but also just better understanding the Asia chapter and the chapters in the continental US. There's a lot of opportunity there. I'm excited to have those come to fruition.
Thank you. Jin?
Well, that is my home chapter, so I'm gonna speak insider language. I definitely think Asia is a growth area for AAJA, and acknowledging that not only we have a growth within Asia, but also a lot of our US members who want to work in Asia as well. 2 years ago, when Asia chapter asked me for help, I decided to not continue run for a VP of finance role on the national board and became a US-based member on the Asia chapter board. We just celebrated 30 years anniversary at N3Con 2 weeks ago. And for us, strategically positioning AAJA in Asia, such a large region and really spread it out region really requires efforts that is more concentrated and that will make actually a huge difference for members on the ground. It is not Asian American in Asia, it's Asian journalists in Asia for us. And we need to see how do we align AAJ's value and also folks what they want in Asia chapter, especially growing our sub-chapters in Seoul and also Philippines.
Thank you both. Two more questions for y'all. How do you plan to serve our broadcast members, and how does that fit into your vision? Jin, we'll start with you.
I would say broadcast members often are faced hardest in the industry. These days, we are seeing company mergers that is really impacting those companies, stand on DEI issues. And from sponsorship point of view, we see those mergers really impacting how they get involved in AAJA. And that goes to how our broadcast members are facing layoffs and facing job cuts and facing increasingly needs to freelance between different stations. That is super tough for them. For us, from AAJA point of view, we really need to figure out how can we be more nimble, and at the same time knowing that many of them would not have the company sponsored trips to come to our conventions. How can we lower the barrier for them? At the same time, knowing that we need to grow that liaison. I'm glad Carl is running as a broadcast member, and I know Chris has been doing this work for a long time. We need to strengthen that tie, really hear their needs, and be more nimble about how we approach it.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, broadcast members are absolutely one of our most important groups in the organization. And just literally from the representation angle, right? Being in front of the camera, representing our members, being so well spoken for our organization, to our sponsors, et cetera. But as Jen said too, and I completely agree, it's a difficult time for broadcast as well, right? Consolidation, the decline of linear television. Part of expanding the tent is to make sure that we are providing broadcast members the necessary tools, the necessary support for them to navigate this changing landscape. And if we look at where the landscape is changing to, there are a lot of broadcast folks that are looking to pivot, right? Or to become more content creators, independent creators as well. The journalistic values are still there, but we have to find ways to support the broadcast journalists as well. And we also have to understand that some of the programs that we do don't necessarily help the broadcast journalists all the time as well, right? So how do we do that? We really have to make sure that we have the proper representation, the proper leadership of broadcast folks in the organization as well.
Thank you. And I think one of the questions that was submitted live tonight, as you know, there are many ways to serve AAJ's members outside of holding office. So if you aren't voted into office, how do you plan to keep contributing to our organization? Frank, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I still have a year and a half left of my term as senior vice president. I intend to fully serve that out. But even if I don't run for another office and if I don't become president, I have a couple of things that I'd love to continue doing. Team AAJ is a big part of what I'd love to do for AAJ. That's our New York City Marathon fundraiser that we have every single year. Just so you know, the New York City Marathon raises $58 million a year, and we're lucky to be able to raise about $50,000 a year, right? And that's something that I'd love to contribute to because that is a great way for the chapters and affinity groups to also fundraise along with national. And it's just such a unique and inspiring performance to bring a team of 6 to 7 AAJ members and to run the New York City Marathon, all in the spirit of supporting AAJ. So I would love to continue doing that with or without an office.
Thank you, Jen.
I will say in my career, I've taken a lot of risks in my jobs, but AAJ has been the through line over and over of that I've been supporting, volunteering, every single year doing thousands of hours literally just to pull convention sponsorship together these days. I still would like to keep getting involved in AAJ, even if I'm not elected. And I do intend to stay on the board because I really believe I bring in different perspectives on the board to bring in new ideas. And also, this isn't really not the moment I'm ready to give that up yet, because I really believe AAJ in the next few years need a fundraiser on the board, need someone who knows how to navigate the operational challenges we might face in the next few years. So yeah, that will be my answer.
Thank you both. And I'm actually going to squeeze in one more bonus member question for tonight. What is the one thing you hope will be your AAJ legacy if elected? Jen, we'll start with you. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, sure. I think, AAJ's success isn't really about my accomplishment. It's about when members feel more connected to AAJ than they do today. And I hope, my legacy would be chapters and affinity groups feel supported rather than isolated. I hope the emerging leaders will have clear pathways into leadership. And also, I hope AAJ is financially stronger and positioned for the next decade. So that would be what I hope to leave with AAJA. Whether or not I become president, that is what I hope all of us want to leave for AAJA, including Frank.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I completely agree. The one thing I think of too a lot is if you were to ask or sample, say, AAJ members, and you ask them, what do you get out of AAJ, right? I want them to be able to answer it with so much passion and inspiration that they can share with others, right? I believe that's contagious. And I think that comes from a lot of the structural things that we've been talking about all night, supporting chapters, affinity groups. The chapters are the front lines to a lot of our membership, making sure folks know where the front doors are, right? Making sure folks are proud, celebrating each other. And a big part of this is I do want to make sure as my legacy that AAJ isn't just celebrating the people that are always winning awards, right? I want us to be able to celebrate failure too. I want us just to celebrate us as who we are. Because I have talked to a lot of members before, just recently or even in the past too. I don't want us to be too Pollyannish about who we are and what we represent, right? I want us to be able to learn from each other's successes, failures, or their trials, right? And I think that's really important for my legacy at AAJs. I just want us to be more open with each other too, and to understand that we're all in this together, and that promise that we keep to ourselves is about supporting each other, whether we win our awards or get the big job or not.
Great. Thank you both. And thank you all so much for your thoughtful answers tonight. We're going to head into closing statements. If you could all keep these under 1 minute each. We'll start with Carl.
Yeah, it's great that we have this forum, we have this space to have these conversations. And just to reiterate, my experience, it may be unconventional in terms of my path into journalism, but having the broadcast perspective is really important. And I'll be the champion. And this is a call out to folks in the audience who are from the broadcast space. Please consider, volunteering for a committee, stepping up for that, because it is so important that your perspectives are heard, and amplifying those and making sure that those are taken into consideration. That's also part of what we are here to do. That's what I'll do, because it's really important. So, just to kind of wrap things up, I know finances can be, daunting for some folks. The goal is to make it less daunting and less intimidating for those who are working with it, especially our treasurers on the chapter staff. So that's why I'm hoping that we'll be talking more in the future.
Thank you, Marianne.
In every city I've worked, from Detroit to San Jose, Los Angeles, Seattle, Hong Kong, DC, and Florida, I've found a home in AAJA. I owe so much of my career to this organization. It would be my privilege to continue serving AAJA as National Vice President of Civic Engagement to help empower our communities, strengthen our voice, and help others carve their paths in journalism, just as AAJA helped me carve mine. AJ is my family. So, like I said before, find me, find the hair, email me, Slack me. Let's talk. If you want to be a part of this, ask me questions, and hope to see you at the convention.
Thanks, Jen.
As we close, I want to acknowledge something important. Frank and I share many of the same hopes for AAJA, and we both care deeply about the organization and its future. What I offer is just not experience, but a commitment to lead through listening, service, and action. Over the years, I've learned from tough feedback, grown as a leader, and became much better because of this community. While my career path has taken unexpected turns, AAJ has always been my unchanging anchor. Through it all, my mindset has never changed. I'm here to serve you, to understand your challenges, to listen, and to dedicate my time, patience, and energy to bring us together as a unified force. And the stake is really high. We're fighting for our careers, our representation, and the future of trusted journalism. If you believe in AAJ's future is strongest when we move forward together, I would be honored to earn your vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Frank?
In closing, I just want to bring out this feeling, and it's feeling to compare and contrast, right? I think when we come to convention and we walk into the open gala room, a lot of us see friends, a lot of us catch up. But a lot of the times, even myself, I go to these other conferences and I walk into these rooms and I feel like I don't belong. It happens a lot sometimes too, right? But I do want all our members, and I do want AAJ to provide that feeling that the wind in your wings, right, as you walk into the room. Because even if you're the only AA and HPI to be in that room, you have the entire AAJ backing behind you, right? And I think that's so important for all of us as we navigate this really difficult industry to know that. And again, that's the promise that I want us to hold for each other, that we'll always support each other through the trials and tribulations of this industry, of being uh, seen as different in newsrooms. I think that's so important that AAJ is there for the folks who don't always feel comfortable walking into those rooms or going to those job interviews or feel like they don't deserve that job. Just know that AJ is there for you. We're there for you. All of us are there for you. And I want AJ to be that wind in your wings as well. So I hope you'll consider me as your presidential candidate. Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you to everyone for tuning into our forum tonight, whether you're watching live or catching up with this later. I apologize that we just couldn't get to every question that was submitted to us tonight and in advance. There were quite a lot, which we're thrilled by, but we will find some way to continue the dialogue with them. All of the questions will be shared with all of the candidates afterwards, so that your questions are addressed. Just one final reminder to make sure your memberships are updated before we send out the ballots on June 11th, and then members will have until Thursday, June 25th to vote, which is during our convention week in Minneapolis. And if you have any other questions that aren't answered on our website, please feel free to email me at vpcoms@aaj.org. Thank you all, and good night.